A very heartfelt February good evening to all of you. Glad to have everyone back. So again, I am Andrew Simler, Social Security Disability Attorney, and this is the sixth in my series of videos on different informational topics on Social Security Disability. And given that we've hit the half dozen mark, I thought I would start this one a little bit differently, just to mix it up a little bit, make it a little bit interesting, try to have a little fun with it. So I've got an interesting topic to present. It's been coming up more and more recently, so that's why I think it's time to present on this topic. And as always, I have a PowerPoint to go with it. But before we even get to that, I kind of want to give the theme of the night. So as I was thinking about doing this topic, I was thinking about one of my proudest non-work achievements. And about 4 years ago, give or take, back in June of 2019, my in-laws were celebrating their 50th wedding anniversary, and we were throwing them a surprise party at a local hotel. So among many things, it felt like almost like a mini wedding we were planning. And one of the things I had volunteered to do was to put together a roughly 10-minute slideshow slash montage, which obviously for those of you who have watched my videos know I don't mind doing those kind of things. But it was basically just their life history of both of them being born up until meeting, falling in love, getting married, having kids, eventually their kids getting married and having grandkids, and so on and so forth. And it was one of the most intricate video projects I had ever done because I ended up basically taking so many photos, placing them in certain ways, having different effects of everything. But I also had to set the whole thing to music, and I knew there was not going to be just one song that was going to capture all of it, especially knowing how long it was going to be. There's no 10-minute song in history that I'm aware of. So I had to figure out using different snippets of songs. And for some reason, my mind gravitated towards that memory because in the middle of the video, there are two very specific song clips of two, I believe, well-known songs. One of them certainly a well-known song. The other one is probably known to people that are familiar with it and the show that it's from. But they play back to back. One rolls right into another, and both of those just seem awfully fitting for tonight's video. So I'm just going to play a quick snippet of those. I'll let everyone who's watching raise their eyebrows to wonder what that even has to do with this, and then you'll see as soon as we start the slideshow. So first I have to do this right, and hopefully I get this right this time. So I believe this is how we do it. I'm going to be sharing my computer audio so you hear this clearly. Let's see if it works. All right, here's song number one. Quick snippets of each of these songs.
Kids, I don't know what's wrong with these kids today. Kids, who can understand anything they say? Kids, they are disobedient, disrespectful oafs, noisy, crazy, sloppy, lazy loafers. While we're on the subject, kids, you can talk and talk till your face is blue. Kids, but they still do just what they want to do. Why can't they be like we were, perfect in every way? What's the matter with kids today?
And here's the other one. A staple of any wedding, anniversary, or any other get-together party or occasion. Nobody says it better than Sister Sledge.
We are family. I got all my sisters with me. We are family. Get up, everybody, and sing.
Okay, enough of the fun and the proverbial chit-chat. So let's stop that share. Hope you enjoyed that little musical intro, and let's figure out what the heck all that means and what it has to do with tonight's topic. Let's get right to it. Well, let's find it and get right to it. There we go. All right. Let's start the slideshow. What are we here to talk about tonight? Kids. We're here to talk about childhood SSI and disabled adult child benefits. So obviously the very first song, Kids, which if those of you who are not familiar with it, that was from the somewhat well-known musical and eventually became a movie as well, Bye Bye Birdie. Very, very popular musical in the 60s and a very, very catchy song. I don't want to tell you how it fit into the montage that I did for my in-laws back then. But then the We Are Family song that I'm sure many of you are familiar with kind of fits with the second part of tonight's topic, which is a different type of child benefit known as disabled adult child or child's disability benefits. And I use that song as a metaphor because that is basically a family benefit. And in some ways, both of these are family benefits, but you'll kind of understand it better when we get there. So I just thought that was really, really appropriate and fitting. The fact that both of those songs just laid side by side in this montage that I did for my in-laws, and they just fit tonight's topic so well. So without further ado, let's jump right in, shall we? As always, with every video, I start my About Me screen, so you have all my information if you don't already have it. And I want to offer something to all of you watching, particularly those that have actually subscribed to the channel, which I thank you very much. I was not aiming specifically to get subscribers, but I appreciate that you took the time to do it. So what I want to offer to you is I'm going to keep doing videos, hopefully on the every month basis that I've been trying to do them. I may hit a slight delay when we get close to May because I'm actually going to be doing a big presentation in May in Nashville at the National Convention for the National Organization of Social Security Claimants Representatives, or NOSCAR for short, which is an organization that's been around for a very long time, has great resources for attorneys like me that do this work. But I am probably going to be busy getting that prepared when we get closer to that. So there might be a delay with the April to May or May to June video, just to be aware. But what I'd like to offer all of you, anyone who's watching or anyone who's subscribing, if there is a specific topic or question you have that you really want to see some type of presentation done on that I haven't done so far, please reach out to me. Reach out through my website, email me, call me, text me, however you want to do it. I would love to hear from you, and I would love to be able to tailor it to something that you may find important or relevant or interesting. I'm going to try to cover so many different topics as we go through there. I have a lot of brainstormed ideas of future monthly videos that I'm going to be covering. This one had been on there a while, so I'm glad to be able to do it now. But I really do hope to be able to keep going with this and covering things that I may not even be thinking of. And some videos in the future may be much shorter than my norm, but I'm going to try to keep covering anything and everything I can. Also, as just a quick side note, just to let everyone know, we've been at this now for about 6 months. We started this in August, or I started this in August, and many of my current and potential new clients have really found a lot of benefit from this, particularly when they're watching videos that are relevant to what they're doing or where their claim currently stands. For example, many of my existing clients have used, and even clients that I've advised that I can't take on, have used the video on preparing for an ALJ hearing to really, really well prepare for their own hearings. And then likewise, the clients who have their claims at the initial or reconsideration levels have been able to tremendously derive benefit from the function report video. I think that's arguably the most watched video I've had because there is so much to it and it makes a huge difference. I've had a lot of claims that have gotten approved on the basis of people recognizing from that video how to do the function report. And it's just tremendous. I'm really, really proud of what we've been able to accomplish so far. And I hope it just continues to grow exponentially. So again, please don't hesitate to send me your topics of interest, and I will do my best to cover them as soon after as I can. All right, so let's get into the topic. So let's start. We're going to break this down into 2 sections because it's all children's benefits, but there's 2 different types we're talking about. So And this is something that I find there's, number one, there's not a lot of information available online. I mean, unless you dig a little bit. There is information on the Social Security website, but it can be tough to decipher. But also, just in general, this is not, certainly not as prevalent or popular of a benefit as adult claims are. There's far less childhood claims than there are adult claims, because there are some things that are different and difficult about these types of benefits. So I've been getting, like I said, a lot more referrals of childhood cases, and sad, sad to say that, and I'm not faulting anybody for this, but there are a lot of attorneys that do Social Security work that won't take childhood cases on because of how different and at times difficult they are, more difficult than adult claims. Um, I'm not going to lie. I don't think they're any easier just because I'm willing to take them on. But if somebody truly could qualify and could benefit from these benefits, no pun intended, I definitely want to do my part to help them. So that's why I don't turn anyone away, no matter what type of benefit, until I've confirmed that it's not a viable claim. But let's talk a bit about how this works. So disability benefits for minor children. So sometimes children are born with or develop the same types of severe impairments as adults. And they're going to deal with challenges throughout childhood and possibly their whole lives, even once they hit adulthood. So that's really the type of situation that calls for potentially these types of benefits. That's what the Social Security Act had in mind when they developed this whole section devoted to childhood benefits. So what can you do if you believe your child is disabled? You can apply for benefits on their behalf. Now, what type of benefits are available for a child? Let's find out. SSI. So for minor children, SSI benefits are the only type of benefits that are available. Now, if you saw this slide turned a different color because I actually pulled this from my original video I did back in August, which was my Social Security 101. And I went over a little bit of the difference between SSI and SSDI. So just as a quick refresher here, SSI is once again a needs-based disability program or a welfare program. You only get paid under this program if you're both medically disabled and you have a financial need. They determine your financial need on countable resources, the income and assets that they count against you, including those of a spouse if you're married or those of parents if you're a minor child. Certain resources, again, don't count against you. And the resource limit, now that's the only part of this that doesn't apply the same. The resource limit is not the same when it's a childhood case. And I don't want to go into too much detail about that, at least not on this slide, but there is a resource on the Social Security website that explains it, because it doesn't specifically go as much by resources as it does by parents' income, which is also based on how many children total are in the household, including non-disabled children. So it's a somewhat, it looks more complicated than it is, but it is a somewhat more involved process to determine. And the last bullet point here doesn't exactly apply the same, just because I made that original video in 2023. We're now in 2024. The maximum SSI amount is actually now $943 a month rather than $914, and it does continue to go up with cost of living. But again, SSI is the only type of benefit that's available for minor children. And the only reason that they're not eligible for anything else is because, as you may recall, SSI is the benefit that's for people that don't work or haven't worked at all, or haven't worked enough in their lifetime. Well, we know, obviously, it's a given fact, children don't work. Minor children don't work. They go to school typically, and they grow up and develop. That's what they do. So they don't have a work history or earnings record of paying into the system. So, of course, they're not qualified for benefits. Or for SSDI benefits, that is, as minor children. So SSI is the only thing that's ever available to them. Now, again, children, like adult claimants, are limited in the countable income or assets. And as I mentioned before, I'm sorry, I don't know why the link didn't come on the way I wanted it to. This might be a difficult link to copy and paste. So if any of you are interested at any time, you could always reach out to me directly and I could send you the link directly through email or other means. But the basic thing that you can do if you just went on and did a Google search, what you want to search for is how does deeming work? That's the way they term the review of parents' income to determine if a family would be eligible for SSI for a minor child or minor children. And this is the website address here that will actually take you right to it. It's an online brochure on the Social Security website that explains it. Now, because of this, just like with adult SSI, there is a chance that you could be determined that a child could be determined to be medically disabled, but still not qualify for these benefits because, again, these are needs-based and public welfare benefits. The theory behind it is if you can otherwise support yourself or be supported, then you are not likely going to be eligible for these benefits. It's really only the types of situations where there's no independent means of support or it's so limited that these benefits are really going to come in handy, even though they are limited too. So a typical example, and I actually just had this recently, I talked to a parent of a very, very young child. I think the child is like 1 year old and has some really, really significant impairments that sound to me like they're easily going to qualify medically. So basically, the parent ended up telling me that taking care of this poor child is a full-time job and they can't work because of it. And in some instances, it is just that. It's that severe for the child that's exactly what they're facing. So in those types of situations, SSI is very appropriate and fitting, and you could easily qualify for it. But I will tell everybody, and this is one thing that I typically do with childhood claims versus adult claims. When I know that SSI is the only available benefit, usually I would want to determine the medical side of things first to see, well, do you really have a disability that could qualify you? And then if you do, then we can figure out, well, will you also meet the financial requirements? With adults, it's usually pretty easy to figure out early on. But with children, it might be a little bit more involved. But at the same time, because childhood claims are a bit different than adult claims, which you're going to see when I get to the subsequent slides here, it actually would behoove you to figure out ahead of time if you would qualify or if the child would qualify financially first. Because if you're not going to qualify financially, because if you can support your child, regardless of what their impairment is, it's not worth it to try to go for SSI for a child. It's just not going to get you anywhere. It's going to be a waste of time and resources. So you want to first make sure you could meet the financial requirements, because if you can't, it's just not worth pursuing. So let's talk now. Let's assume you get past that first leg of it and you can meet the financial criteria. You don't have more than you're allowed to in countable income or assets. So we get to the medical eligibility determination. So how does it work for minor children? So the key thing to realize is that with adult claims, the hallmark focus and determination is, do your medical impairments prevent you from working a full-time job consistently? That's what it comes down to in the 5-step sequential evaluation process. Well, again, children don't work. So how can you determine their disability if it's not based on their ability to work? Well, there's 2 methods that they employ. And with childhood claims, there's no 5-step sequential evaluation process because so many of those steps just don't apply. There's no step 1, are you currently working? There's no step 4, can you do your past relevant work? There's no step 5, is there other work you can adjust to? None of that applies. So this is how childhood claims are determined. And I see I got ahead of myself there. Well, no, I didn't actually. I take that back. The first possible way is equivalent to the same step 3 of the 5-step process for adults, meeting a listing. So just like with adults, there are childhood impairment listings. You can Google them and look them up. They are in many ways fairly similar, and some of them are identical to adult listings. So it is possible that a child, based on how severe their impairment is, can actually qualify on that basis, based on the specific rigid medical criteria, no different than adults. And if they do, with the same categories that adults have, they can automatically direct a finding of disability if the medical evidence strongly supports it. And typically you do have to have some pretty pinpoint objective testing or findings to support it. So MRI, CAT scan. For mental health impairments, it's usually got to be some kind of mental status exam, but or maybe intelligence testing if you're dealing with a child that's got ADHD, learning disability, autism, things like that. So that's the first way a child can be disabled. And that's, again, that's pretty much on par with the way they do it for adults. The second way, and this is where it's not as well known, so this is what I hope to explain on this video. Functional equivalence of a listing. So with adults, we say meeting or equaling a listing, and in many ways, those are kind of one and the same. But with children, it's not. That's why I separated it out. So to meet a listing means you've actually met and matched the criteria, like pretty much verbatim. But to functionally equal a listing is very different. What they do is when a child is determined to have at least one severe impairment, which is the same requirement that adults have, they evaluate the limitations caused by those impairments. And most specifically, they evaluate them within 6 specific domains of childhood functioning and development, which will be discussed on the next slide. So these are the 6 domains of childhood functioning and development. And they're contained at Social Security ruling 09-1P for reference if you wanted to look them up. But this is a pretty good summary of them. The first one is acquiring and using information. How well a child can learn and acquire information as well as their ability to utilize that information. So this tends to go more in terms of children that have learning or cognitive or attention type disabilities or impairments like ADHD. 2, attending and completing tasks. A child's ability to focus and maintain attention as well as their ability to begin, continue, and complete activities at a normal pace for their age. Again, pretty much in line with mental or cognitive related impairments, but could just as quickly and easily apply in physical health impairments too. If you've got physical impairments that cause symptoms like pain or discomfort or constantly having to use the bathroom or things of that nature, that can just as easily and quickly interfere with attending and completing tasks. If you'll all excuse me for a minute, I'm going to actually go grab my water because my throat is getting a little bit dry. Bear with me a second. We'll call that one my first official blooper of the Andrew Sindler SSD Attorney YouTube channel. So, all right, hopefully that'll help clear the throat a little bit. All right, the third domain of functioning. Interacting and relating with others. The child's ability to connect and cooperate with others, abide by rules or restrictions, respond to authority or criticism, respect the possessions of others, and develop a sense of community. So again, this one typically more so comes in the realm of mental health related impairments. So it could be the ADHDs, could be the oppositional defiant disorders, anxiety, depression, things of that nature. All right, the fourth domain is moving about and manipulating objects. How well a child can move his or her body from one location to another and how well he or she moves and manipulates objects. So this one is clearly within the realm of physical impairments. If you got a child that's got significant physical problems, then you know this one's going to come into play. You know, I had a childhood claim years ago where the impairments were all physical in nature, and it was a really unusual and somewhat rare bone disorder that was causing very odd looking deformities on the child, where not only were they not able to use their arms and legs in the traditional way, they also, you could just tell basically by looking at them, you know, what it entailed. The fifth one is caring for yourself, how well a child is able to take care of him or herself. Straightforward, and again, that can encompass both physical and mental health impairments. And then the sixth and final one, which sort of relates to that prior one, health and physical well-being, the cumulative physical effects of the child's impairment and its associated medications or treatments that are not considered in the caring for self domain. So again, this could encompass both physical and mental health impairments, particularly when medications are required. So if a child has mental health related impairments, like being on, let's say, Ritalin or Vyvanse for ADHD, or some kind of medication for bipolar or depression or anxiety. Sometimes the medications themselves can be just as troubling, no different than adults. They can cause significant side effects that affect the health and well-being of the child. And that's where this domain also accounts for that. So within the 6 domains of functioning, what again we're looking at to determine the functional equivalence of a listing are the degrees of limitations within those 6 domains. There are 5 degrees of limitation. None, of course, speaks for itself. Mild, which pretty much means what it sounds like. Moderate, pretty much right down the middle. Marked or extreme. Now, the only 2 we're really going to need to be focused on and concerned with are marked or extreme limitations. And here's why. In order to qualify medically for SSI and say that they have functionally equaled a listing, a child has to show that he or she has at least 2 domains where there are marked limitations, or at least 1 domain where there is an extreme limitation. So, of course, beg the question, how do you define marked and extreme limitations? I'm so glad you asked. Marked limitations are limitations that severely interfere. Sorry for my grammatical error there. Limitations that severely interfere with the child's ability to engage in activities related to a domain of functioning. Now, the way I typically describe it to my clients when I'm talking to them about this is a marked limitation is a really serious limitation, but it's not so serious that the child can't do whatever activity or domain that it's being used to describe. So to have a marked limitation means they need a lot of help, but that doesn't mean they can't do it at all, or that they can't even do it on their own. But it's really limited. That's what defines a marked limitation. An extreme limitation are those that very seriously interfere, sorry again for the grammatical error, with a child's ability to engage in activities related to a domain of functioning. So basically, if it's extreme, it's pretty much to the point that the child can't do it at all, or they can't do it on their own. So if you've got that, then that's pretty much all you need. So again, you need 1 extreme or 2 marked. It doesn't matter which 2, if it's both of them. It doesn't matter which 1, if it's 1. But that's what you need to show in order to prove disability for a child. So how do we evaluate those domains, and who does so? Well, the most effective way to evaluate the domains is through a medical source statement or RFC questionnaire, which I know I've talked about in some prior videos. And the best people to complete those are doctors, of course, or medical providers that are treating your child. So yeah, sometimes they're not seeing an actual MD doctor. They might see a nurse practitioner or a PA, and that's fine too. And then most important of all, teachers and educators. And I emphasize the teachers and educators part because teachers and educators are the ones who see your child far more frequently than anyone else. Probably, arguably, it could even be said that they see your child more than you do as the parent. Because even though you're working at the same time parents are in school typically, or you might be working, but a teacher or educator is with your child 5 days a week, theoretically, for most of the year. School year is, 9.5 to 10 months of a year, give or take. And they're with them, 6-7 hours a day, 5 days a week. So they know, they see these things, and they're really in a arguably really advantageous position to know how your child is impacted. The role of the teachers, educators, and schools. So, like I said, they're in the best position, usually better than doctors or medical professionals. So the medical professionals and doctors diagnose the impairments, and they treat the impairments from a medical standpoint, but they don't get to see how the child is impacted on a daily basis the same way these teachers and educators do. And they don't get to have hands-on approach to helping them with it the same way they do. So if the child is on, I certainly find frequently when I get contacted about pursuing a childhood SSI claim, without question, I mean, it's really rare for me to encounter a situation where this doesn't apply. the parent tells me that the child is on an IEP, an individualized education plan, for those of you who are not aware of it, or a 504 plan. And if they are on that or they receive special education, and usually those all kind of go hand in hand, it's very helpful as well, especially if a child is held back one or more grades due to medical problems or has missed a lot of days from school due to their impairments or and so on and so forth. Now, interestingly enough, the concept of missing a lot of days from school due to impairments, or even children that might, let's say, especially in this day and age since the pandemic, have to switch to doing remote or virtual schooling because they can't do in person for whatever reason. They can't be around other kids. They can't be exposed to things in the school because it makes them sick, whatever the circumstances. This is where there's the closest overlap and interplay between childhood and adult claims, because as you all may know, and I've probably mentioned this in prior videos, if an adult is likely going to be absent excessively from a job, of course they're not going to be employable, and of course they'll be considered disabled. And if the absences, of course, are due to medical issues that are causing them to be absent, then that pretty much ices a disability claim and guarantees it'll be approved. Well, interestingly, if you have a documented record and history of a child missing a lot of days of school, not only can that help the same way approve a childhood claim and certainly get at least one of those domains up to a marked or extreme level of limitation, but it's also going to be a direct comment on a child's ability to work in the adult working world when they become an adult. So it is important when you have that documented to make sure you have that documentation handy for these claims. And again, likewise, if a child is being held back for whatever reason, and I'll be honest with you all, I do tend to see far less of that these days. I think we're very much in a day and age where it is far less commonplace for a child to be held back, no matter how much they're struggling or how much trouble they're having or how low their grades are. Somehow educators are finding way in the no child left behind mindset of pushing them through. But that doesn't mean that even if they're at the grade level they're supposed to be at for their age, theoretically, doesn't mean that they're at that grade level learning wise. And the one thing you can always look into, and that's where an IEP or a 504 plan is typically going to come into play, is what grade level they're doing basic stuff on: reading, writing, doing math. Those are important to know. So if you got a child that's in 6th grade, but they're reading at a 1st grade level, that's significant. Even though they're at the grade they're supposed to be at for their age, that's a comment on how their impairments are affecting them. So this is where you really want to have pinpoint documentation to help prove these claims. And no different than adult claims, the documentation is what matters the most, always. Other important considerations on childhood claims. If you know in advance, there's a reasonably good chance your child won't qualify for the non-medical financial criteria, you might be asking yourself, is it not even worth it or a good idea to pursue the claim? Well, for the reasons that follow, I would say absolutely not. Now, I know I said from the get-go that you might want to first make sure you can qualify financially, and that is true. And you still may decide if you won't, that it's not worth going through. But there is sort of a little hidden silver lining to why you still might want to pursue it, even if you know it's going to result in no award of benefits. And here's the reason why. If your child won't be eligible for financial reasons, it may still be a good idea to try to get them adjudicated, quote, disabled, because once your child is deemed disabled on record, that can absolutely help them in the future, both if they eventually qualify financially and in the future if they apply as an adult, which is going to segue us into the other type of benefit in a second. One thing I also want to mention, and I don't believe it's on the slide that's to come, but I do want to mention this as well. If a child is determined to be disabled under the childhood standards, that's great. And if you're eligible for the benefits, that's great too. That's what they're there for. But one thing you need to be aware of is that being found disabled as a child does not guarantee that you're also going to be found disabled as an adult, because when you do become an adult, you're not judged on the same standard. So let's get to the next page and slide, because that should start to talk about this. So again, segue into disabled adult child claims. So again, Once a child turns 18 or 19, if they're still living at home and attending secondary school, meaning high school, they're no longer considered to be minor children by law, and they will be treated and evaluated as adults, even though they're children in your eyes. Now, just like minor children with no work history behind them, adult children, if they're applying when they first become adults at 18 or 19, are initially eligible for SSI, and that's pretty much the only benefit that they'll be entitled to. But at that point, one benefit and advantage they have is that their parents' income and assets are not going to be directly imputed to them, even when they live at home. There still may be a small amount that they get credited for basic necessities if the parent's putting a roof over their head and food on their plates and clothes on their backs. But thinking about all that in the grand scheme of things, is that all that they're entitled to? And is that fair if that is all they're entitled to? Well, I'm sure you can guess where I'm going with this. Disabled adult child SSDI benefits. The magic fairy has waved his or her wand and created something much fairer in this situation. So children who have been dealing with medical problems their whole life, since they may never enter the workforce to create their own earnings record and pay into the system like their parents or other adults have done, Social Security recognized that unfair disadvantage and imbalance, so to speak. So they set up a special program under Title II, under the Social Security Disability Insurance Program, and this is to benefit those very children, to ensure that they never get to a point where they're going to have to always report their countable income and assets to attempt to keep their SSI benefits if they get approved for them. So SSA created this hybrid benefit that again is known as a disabled adult child DAC or child's disability benefit, CDB. Adult children are again evaluated as adults, but instead of receiving benefits under their own earnings record, they are attempting to collect benefits under one or both of their parents' earnings records, if the parents have one. They do have to have their own, of course, and usually they do. Now, I say and action because here we go, getting right into how we put this in action. So, okay, it looks like for some reason, I'm not sure how this ended up here. This slide was supposed to have been removed, but somehow it did not get removed. Same thing with this slide. I'm not sure, so I'm actually going to exit the slideshow for a moment. I'm going to try to see how those slides remain when they shouldn't have. Okay, I see. I just got a little probably tired late at night and a little sloppy and just forgot to remove them. So I'm going to remove them now, and we're going to pick the slideshow right back up, right where we left off. So bear with me a minute. Okay, this should be where we are. All right, disabled adult child benefits eligibility. Okay, so first of all, I would advise, if you're either not familiar or if you need a little refresher, go back to my original video that discusses the 5-step sequential evaluation process, because it applies just the same for these types of benefits. But there's more. In addition to actually proving the child's disability under the 5-step sequential evaluation process, you also have to prove that the disabled adult child's disability began between the ages of 18 and 22, or the child cannot qualify. And as if that wasn't enough, there's one more. One or both parents have to be currently disabled, retired, or deceased. And if the parent is disabled or retired, they must be currently receiving those types of benefits through Social Security. And again, the parent has to have insured status. So again, because you as the disabled adult child are attempting to collect benefits against your parent's earnings record, they can't allow it if your parent is still working, because they're still earning and paying into the system and developing a record. And theoretically, again, it comes back to the whole concept of, if they're not collecting benefits against their own record, nobody else should be allowed to either, even though there is a slight exception to that that doesn't apply in this case. It applies with disabled adults, married couples specifically, which I'll probably cover in a future video, but I'm not going to get into that now. So again, the requirement is first, you prove disability the same way under the 5-step SEP. Secondly, the child has to prove disability between the ages of 18 and 22, which is why it's so crucial that if a child clearly believes, or if an adult on behalf of a child clearly believes that they're disabled from early adulthood or even childhood, you want to get it established on record as early as possible, both as a child and then again as an adult. Even if you're still just going for SSI initially, because if you are just going for SSI initially, then even if you don't qualify financially, you will have it established on record that the child is disabled as of the ages of 18 to 22. And you'll have the relevant medical documentation that would be much harder to come by if you do this many years down the line. And I have encountered that situation before where I have an adult that comes to me that has been on SSI and has been disabled, or perhaps not on SSI, but has been disabled since childhood or early adulthood, but they're coming to me many years down the line after that, and they don't readily have their medical records available, and it's going to be hard to track them down if too many years have passed, especially if you're in a state that has laws that don't require your medical providers to retain them for as long. And there are a lot of states that do that. In Maryland, here where I am right now, the current law says adult records don't have to be kept longer than 5 years after the patient has no longer been treated at that facility or by that doctor. Now, if all of the above requirements are satisfied, the child is eventually going to receive a percentage of the parent's disability retirement amount. It does not cut into what the parent receives for themselves. So if the parent is already on disability or retirement, they're still getting their full amount. This is additional. It comes separate from what the parent gets. And again, the huge benefit to these types of benefits, and sad that it's so often overlooked and so many people don't know about it because they don't advertise this heavily, or some attorneys aren't really as familiar with it. It's something I've encountered a lot in my career. That's why I can talk about it the way I can. What's so vital about it and what's so important, and this is when I have an adult child that's eligible and I have the parents talking to me on behalf of the child, this is their primary concern. Parents aren't going to be around forever. And in a theoretical sense, more often than not, parents don't outlive their children. So parents have an icy cold fear that I've got a disabled child that is an adult now, but has been disabled for a long time, is never really going to be able to handle things on their own or support themselves or anything like that, never going to be able to work. But what's going to happen when I'm no longer here? Well, if the adult child is receiving SSI only, then again, they're always going to have to account for their income and assets to make sure they keep qualifying. And eventually there may come a point where the parent passes away, but leaves them whatever assets or whatever they have in their name that the child will suddenly inherit. And if that happens, if they're on SSI, that could put them over the resources threshold, and then they won't qualify for SSI and won't know how to support themselves. So parents have to resort to certain tools available to them, such as setting up a special needs trust, which is not something I'm going to get into for the purpose of this video, but it's a way of shielding those assets in the future so that they don't lose SSI. But if a disabled adult child eventually becomes eligible for these benefits, they are payable under Title II, which means there is no income or asset limitation and no need to report them in the future and no need to shield them in the future. So it is a huge benefit. And again, these benefits continue even after the parent passes away. As long as the disabled adult child is still alive and still disabled, that's all that matters. So it's not always immediately apparent or evident when a child is eligible for these benefits. And in some instances, a child is not going to be eligible for them until the parent again retires or becomes disabled, which could be many years down the line. But if you have established disability through an SSI claim, you've already got it on record. This child is disabled and has been disabled since 18 to 22. That's the key requirement. So some final practical considerations and miscellaneous. Again, I just said this basically, but just to reiterate, if there's no immediate entitlement to disabled adult child benefits, you should still at least pursue the SSI and again get it adjudicated disabled, as I explained. All medical documentation should be compiled and saved for that time period because, again, sometimes disabled adult child benefits you're not eligible for until many years down the line. And Social Security notoriously loses records and documents regularly. So you want to compile, even if they are already on file with Social Security from an SSI claim, you still want to compile them and have them handy because you just never know when you're going to need them. And again, as I stated before, if you're on SSI as a minor child, you don't get an automatic entitlement to or have your benefits converted from childhood to adult. That's one of the most common misconceptions I get from people that reach out to me as adults. They'll tell me, I was on SSI as a child, and I have the same impairments I had as a child, so I thought it was supposed to continue in. No, does not work that way, unfortunately. It's just not that cut and dried. And again, mainly because when you become an adult, your basis for determining disability suddenly becomes your ability or inability to work, full-time work. And the adult standard takes over, and they can't just convert it from a childhood one and say, well, if a child was found disabled, of course, they're also going to be disabled as an adult. And I have seen plenty of instances where adult children apply for benefits, SSI, and get denied, even though it's the same benefit, same impairments that they qualified for as minor children. Disabled child claims procedures, same process as adult claims. Like I said, the same sequential evaluation process, also same process for initial application, reconsideration if you get denied at that, request for an ALJ hearing if you get denied a reconsideration, appeals counsel if you get denied by the ALJ, and then federal court. And I've certainly had my share of childhood cases that have gone that far, so it is not uncommon. As with adult claims, no question about it, having an attorney to help navigate and guide is extremely helpful, so always advisable. As always, as I end every video and slideshow, if any of you have questions, you know how you can reach me. I make myself available readily, and I also definitely do my part to return calls and emails timely. Those of you who know me know that's one of my big pet peeves is not doing that. So always glad to help. And again, phone and email are the best ways to contact me. I'll respond directly to calls and emails and also respond to texts. All right. Well, that concludes this latest video under the Andrew Sindler, SSD attorney YouTube channel. I want to thank you all for tuning in, and I will look forward to seeing you at the next one. Take care. Bye.